Space can be a very deadly environment to find yourself in, what with the freezing temperatures, no air, and of course amorphous horrors bent on tearing you limb from limb. But if you still want to venture out into the inky black void, you should at least prepare yourself properly by checking out Lost in Cult's Make Us Whole: The History of Dead Space, a definitive, comprehensive tome on one of the most chilling survival horror franchises ever made. At 272 pages and coming in both a standard or limited signed edition by Dead Space series producer and writer Chuck Beaver, Make Us Whole presents never-before-seen interviews, production artwork, and looks at early prototypes, and it spans across every facet of the franchise, from the main entries to the spin-offs and even the projects that morphed into other media. The pre-order period for Make Us Whole ends on December 31st, so do check it out if you're interested. But if you're a bit squeamish when it comes to horror, right now Lost in Cult is also collaborating with the legendary Tetsuya Mizuguchi for Sounds and Vision Enhance at 10. This is a gorgeous, extensive archive of Enhance's titles, such as Res Infinite, The Tetris Effect, Humanity, and Lumines Remastered, and you can opt to own this piece of visual and auditory art via two very limited editions: the box set featuring a gorgeous art book, sample CD, and Mizuguchi's signature, or the lavish 9-vinyl album set, which contains music from Enhance's entire history, which I'm personally gonna grab. Its pre-order period ends on December 10th, so whether you're into sci-fi scares, soothing sounds, or both, hit the links in the description and pin comment below. And thanks again to Lost in Cult for sponsoring today's video. And now, without further ado, let's set foot on the hostile rock known as Callisto. Welcome back to another star-studded and cold-blooded episode of What Happened, the YouTube-style pop culture media show that regularly plumbs the depths of space for the juiciest stories throughout the dark, foreboding galaxy that is video game development. And really, there's few stories that are directly comparable to that of the Callisto Protocol, which was quickly positioned as the next big quadruple A video game IP that, okay, well, maybe that was too many A's, but was still massively hyped as the spiritual successor to another sci-fi horror franchise that hadn't seen a resurgence in nearly a decade. But unfortunately, for reasons we will get into, that hype sort of imploded, which was due, but not limited to, massively unchecked overspending, sudden devastating walkouts, and the return of the original franchise it itself was trying to emulate. So grab your spacesuits, check your vitals, and load up your line guns, maybe not that last one, as I answer the question, what happened to the Callisto Protocol?
The fuck are you looking at?
As I'm sure some of you will be aware, this all starts with Dead Space, the cornerstone of EA's late 2000s attempt to curate original non-sports IPs. Was originally the brainchild of Glenn Schofield, a producer who moved to EA Redwood Shores after directing a number of games over at Crystal Dynamics. Oh, and which games are those, you may ask, even though you didn't? Well, I'm happy to tell ya, cause we got both 3D Gex games. Mad Dash Racing, I've literally never seen this before. Legacy of Kain, Blood Omen 2, and on top of them all, my precious, my beloved Akuji the Heartless. But after settling in at EA and producing a solid string of hits for them, like Return of the King and From Russia with Love, Schofield then pitched Dead Space with an early demo running on original Xbox hardware in 2006, taking his love of horror sci-fi like Event Horizon and combining it with the shooting mechanics of Resident Evil 4. EA took the gamble and gave it the green light, eventually allowing players to stomp and stomp and stomp some more as Isaac Clarke in the gore-filled hallways of the USS Ishimura. Schofield did not direct the project, however, and instead produced it, as he also worked as EA Redwood Shores general manager, although that wouldn't last much longer. Instead of staying on and overseeing the development of Dead Space 2, Glenn co-founded Sledgehammer Games and entered an agreement with EA rival Activision, which saw him and Sledgehammer moving cozily into the gaping maw that is the Call of Duty mines. While there, Glenn directed two of them, 2017's World War II and 2014's Advanced Warfare, again injecting his love of future tech and sci-fi into the formula. But much like his go-around with EA, his stay at Sledgehammer was not permanent, leaving the company in February of 2018 while still retaining a working relationship with Activision. That is, until December of that same year, where he left their employ altogether. This, and I'm assuming here, is because he received a very, very tempting offer from Krafton Inc., the South Korean publisher of PUBG, with the offer being pretty much anything he wanted. This partnership was formally announced in June of 2019, with Schofield optimistically saying, "Throughout my career, I've had a lot of opportunities to make some remarkable games that tell incredible stories, and each of them has meant something special to me. But now, those learnings will help me build a AAA team that can explore new designs and concepts at striking distance. As a creative, the freedom to explore the PUBG universe has me excited about the possibilities, which I view as beyond the Battle Royale genre. Today represents a special moment for me, and I'm so thankful to be taking this journey with the team at PUBG Corporation." That quote allows me to smoothly segue into something I'd wager a few of you might have forgotten or never even knew in the first place, and represents one of, if not the earliest, peculiarity of Callisto Protocol's development, and that is that it started life and was publicly announced as an extension of the PUBG universe, something that obviously would not last. It's peculiar in that I can't remember many, if not any time, where a new title has been publicly announced as part of a franchise, but then just suddenly isn't. Usually when these types of changes do occur, like, for example, Devil May Cry starting off as a Resident Evil game, is typically far from the eyes of the public and done more or less in secret. But in the age of social media and tons of money and hype being poured into gaming more than ever, it's sometimes hard to keep a lid on things, or easy to announce stuff a bit too early. And in the case of the Callisto Protocol, scheduling and timing would prove to be, rather totally devastating. A year after the announcement that Mr. Schofield would be leading Striking Distance Studios and delivering a new narrative-based game for Krafton, a mysterious trailer with, and this won't be the last time you hear it, Dead Space vibes, played during the 2020 Please Wrap It Up Awards.
All right, well, congratulations to the Swedish chef.
This was the Callisto Protocol's first public announcement, and the anticipation was already soaring into the heavens, because at that point, EA had publicly shown zero interest in reviving its own space-themed horror game. So Glenn was happy to start gassing up the hype machine even further over the next few months and even years, doing multiple interviews with various outlets and clarifying what happened with the prior connection to PUBG. That seemed to stem from the fact that, as they were developing the game, more and more fantastical sci-fi elements were being added to the point where it really didn't make sense to chain it to a battle royale game that looked, very distinctly not sci-fi, or cutting edge for that matter. Krafton apparently had no issue with this, assuring Schofield that it was his game and ultimately his choice. Aside from that though, another topic that would keep recurring throughout all these interviews was, of course, Dead Space. But when the gamer pressed about whether he had been contacted to be involved in some way, he replied with, "I don't really think about legacy. What I think about is just making a really good game. Yeah, the Callisto Protocol is a sci-fi horror, but it's different. There's some similarities here and there because it's me. I hope that people not forget Dead Space, but just put it aside. The way we tell the story is in movies and in cinematics that seamlessly go into the game. The character does a lot of talking, there's a follower, there's other characters in the game, so it should feel different." Now, while you're always supposed to be hyping up your current project, the examples Glenn used there maybe weren't the most accurate way to distance himself from his original sci-fi creation. Sure, the first Dead Space was an almost minimalist, isolating experience back in 2008, but it was the only one he directly worked on, so his comments weren't really reflective of the franchise as a whole. Isaac Clarke would start to speak plenty in the sequel, and multiple other playable characters, cutscenes, lore, and even co-op were introduced in subsequent games. So what was the Callisto Protocol doing that would really set itself apart? Well, the answer would become more and more vague as time would go on, and would be diluted even further come July of 2021. This is where GamesBeat published a rumor saying that EA had their Montreal-based Motive studio working on a remake of, you guessed it, the original Dead Space, a rumor EA confirmed a few weeks later with its official announcement. This obviously muddied the waters a bit because while Callisto Protocol had hype and Krafton's backing behind it, Dead Space obviously had the much more recognizable brand name, and a refurbishing of the original in the wake of all the successful Resident Evil revivals seemed like a solid bet. And in one of those very the road not traveled style moments, Glenn Schofield also revealed he was not totally unaware this remake was coming when asked about it by The Gamer. As I've said before, I root for developers. Maybe in the old days I didn't so much. I would see something that's better than what I've done and I'd go, I gotta get to that or better. I want them to do well because it's something I started. It feels weird that I'm not involved, but I want us to do a little better, but I wish them well. But when The Gamer pressed about whether he had been contacted to be involved in some way, he replied with, "There's a story there, but let's just say no. EA didn't want to build a studio in our area, California, anymore. They realized how expensive it was, so they decided to go to Montreal, which is probably a good move. And you know what? This opportunity is really what I want." But as it turns out, what a person wants, or the best laid plans, are the ones that sometimes just backfire no matter what, and this was reflected in the sales, budget, and reviews between the two very similar space-based survival horror titles, with EA, and not Krafton, coming out the clear winner. The Callisto Protocol released on consoles and PC on December 2nd, 2022, and out of all the formats, most expected the PC to be the superior version, but it turned out to be anything but. It was riddled with performance issues, constant stuttering, visual bugs, and even crashes right out of the gate, with Schofield claiming that a clerical error was responsible for at least the stuttering issue. I myself opted for this version and found the experience to be pretty much unplayable, and it was like this for many. The console versions fared a good bit better, but there was still the overwhelming sense that the Callisto Protocol needed more time in the sun, as it clearly didn't receive the polish and optimization it should have had for such a hyped release. But even if those technical fixes were present, reviews were not so hot on the core gameplay due to a variety of reasons. Praise was heaped on the game's atmosphere, graphical fidelity, production value, and the like, but most felt like it was a lot of wasted potential and desperately needed more development time, which it very literally did. But despite patch after patch and improvement after improvement, the Callisto Protocol's reputation didn't really seem to change much, especially when reports started surfacing of the game's almost unbelievable price tag of $162 million, which placed it in the top 20 of the most expensive games ever made. It was then confirmed quite early that Callisto would also miss its sales targets by almost 3 million copies, as it was only expected to sell through 2 million throughout the next year at best. And this was something that plainly fell on the shoulders of Krafton execs, as it's pretty wild to think that a brand new horror IP was going to easily clear 5 mil. These rough waters would then be further stirred in September of 2022 when Schofield received backlash for a tweet he made that many interpreted as glorifying crunch culture, which has been a real problem in the industry for decades. We were working 6 to 7 days a week. Nobody's forcing us. Exhaustion, tired, COVID, but we're working. Bugs, glitches, performance fixes, one last pass through audio, 12 to 15 hour days. This is gaming. Hard work, lunch, dinner, working. You do it 'cause you love it. Despite him deleting this tweet and issuing an apology, the whole affair really didn't ingratiate him nor the game with most fans and the media alike. This all then came to a head precisely 1 year later, where Schofield then announced he was leaving Striking Distance Studios altogether after a flurry of more bad press, such as several developers claiming they were not properly credited for their work, and 30 members of the team being suddenly let go some 2 months prior. But now, in 2024, and Mr. Schofield no longer working under Krafton's employ, he sat down this past August for a tell-all with Dan Allen Gaming to explain exactly why things went off the rails, and, well, it was a lot. I wanted about 3.5 more months of development on the Callisto Protocol, and I was led to believe for about 3 months that that's the way it was gonna be. In October or September of 2021, I was told, "You're gonna get the time, no regrets." That was the term that kept getting used. No regrets. Put whatever you want into the game. January comes around and some of the folks come over and they said, no, it's December of 2022. And I was like, it's not gonna get done. It's gonna cost you more money. It's not like it costs you less money because you're getting it out 3 months sooner. But if you want it done, I've got to accelerate everything by 3.5 months, which means I have to jam people on here. If I need 20 people, I actually need to get 30 or 40. However, that reliance on manpower was already in severe jeopardy when the exact opposite happened earlier in 2021, when 49 Striking Distance employees just straight up quit, as they were most likely offered better positions elsewhere. The pressure was then certainly on, and according to Schofield, this resulted in communication completely breaking down in the last few months. We know what we wanted to put in the game and we're just gonna patch it. Krafton wasn't talking to us. We did 86 patches. That 3.5 months though, that's what we needed. He would then go on to say he did indeed pitch Krafton a sequel right before he decided to leave, but they were absolutely not biting, as they were still stinging from the losses they had already accrued. I knew it wasn't going to happen because they were so insistent that they make the money on the first game, and that wasn't the discussion we had at the beginning of all this. The discussion we had was The Witcher. Look at The Witcher. That was the discussion. And by that, Schofield meant the plan was to establish themselves with the first game, then reiterate, polish, and improve with sequels, but obviously, that plan has been fully forgotten and left by the wayside. And if you'd like a few more details direct from Schofield himself, make sure to check out the links in the description below to Dan Allen Gaming, as it's rare when a notable developer speaks so candidly and so soon after a critical and commercial misfire. While Striking Distance is still operational, there's been no word what they're currently working on. Actually they just released something called Redacted that I've never heard of? And despite Glenn Schofield announcing he was starting a new venture after his departure, there's been no details on what that will be. But honestly, throw a dart at a map of the entire video game industry and you have a good chance of predicting where he'll end up. Looking back at the entire Callisto situation though, I get a big waft of biting off more than you can chew when you already have very little time to chew it. I mean, making a lucrative deal, founding a new studio, immediately developing something very similar to a past hit, spending a lot of money a lot of quickly, and wanting to see that investment returned almost immediately. It's almost a foolproof recipe for disaster, and I ain't gonna lie to ya, it does make me the tiniest bit nervous for the future of Tango Gameworks and Hi-Fi Rush. If you know of any other stories of troubled developments drifting through the cold vacuum of space, Let me know in the comments below or head on over to the dank viscera caked cell blocks that is my social media. See you next time, and thanks for watching!